5 at 2:03. Do the roll call, Meg?
Thomas Bradford,
Here.
Brad Freeze,
Here.
Russ Redmond, Clay Damon, Jill Wenta,
Here.
Michelle Shrouse,
Here.
Wade Chance.
Okay. Approval of agenda. First off, I have some deletions. Number 3, under presentations, Marjorie Craig is not going to be able to do it this month. I think she's going to do it in May. And number 5, under new business, we have to delete that, and we can discuss it after the presentations or during committee comments later on. Does anyone else have any additions, deletions, nominations? Can I get a motion to approve the?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
No nays. Citizens, you are citizens, so, but we'll go straight to our presentations. So first up, we have Bud Howard, Director of Information Services at the Loxahatchee River Environmental Control District. He is going to discuss Loxahatchee River Environmental Monitoring Program and some information on stormwater runoff.
I'll throw in some stormwater talk too. Good, if we can put that in presentation mode. Let's, give you a little more landscape to look at it.
Sorry.
No worries. I think that on the lower left there, that screen down there. There we go. Let's go back one. Perfect. All right. Thanks for inviting me to come speak with you here. Long, what, 15 years almost in Tequesta, almost 40 plus in the Jupiter and Tequesta area. I've worked a variety of different roles, private environmental consulting, worked for Palm Beach County Environmental Resources for a number of years, Taylor Engineering, who you'll actually get to hear some of the work that they've done, highly respected engineering firm out of Jacksonville. And then for the past 15 or 16 years, I guess I've been over at the Loxahatchee River District. So one of the division directors over there, wear a few different hats, managing the laboratory, the customer service department on the wastewater side, and then the IT shop. So appreciate you inviting me to come. So for those who aren't familiar, Loxahatchee River District is the company you pay your sewer bill to, but we also do a lot more than that. We're an independent special district, so we have a publicly elected governing board. And our main order of business is providing serving as the regional wastewater utility. Each day we're treating 6 to 7 million gallons of wastewater that comes out of our houses and businesses, and that water gets treated to a high level and then goes back out to many of the area golf courses for landscape irrigation, as well as communities like Abacoa. And also involved in environmental education. We have our education facility over at Burt Reynolds Park off of US 1. And then we also operate the Wild Pine Lab, which supports our wastewater treatment plant operations, but then also they switch hats and do extensive work on the river, and that's what I'm largely talking about today. So as far as getting familiar, many people I don't think appreciate how extensive the Loxahatchee River is. I don't think the pointer's going to work on this, but you can see you got Jupiter Inlet down there. These are mile markers that you see in the ovals, and the main northwest fork of the river runs all the way up to the north, goes into Jonathan Dickinson State Park, but then loops back around to the south and actually meets up with Riverbend Park. And so to kind of take you on a virtual tour of that, if you haven't done it already, the upper stretch of the river is truly remarkable. This time of year especially, the cypress trees are greened out, and that section of the wild and scenic river is beautiful. Rent a kayak from Riverbend Park and paddle down to Maston Dam and back is my favorite trip to do, especially this time of year. Moving down the estuary, we start to get to the area where we've transitioned from the freshwater cypress swamp to more the areas that receive some marine water. So you transition into the salty, mixed salt and freshwater area. Vegetation switches to mangroves, and we see oyster habitat, which has been prevalent in the river in different areas over the decades, and I'll touch on some of that. Moving further downstream, obviously we're into the lower estuary, where most of us like to go, and many of us go out and have fun and experience it. And this area, obviously from an ecological perspective, is receiving marine water twice a day with each incoming tide, and then during outgoing tide can get a meaningful amount of fresh water as it's running off the landscape. So I think many of us in the community have a tendency to kind of take this river for granted, and it's interesting to me that leadership in the community has been so progressive and doing so many things to help protect it and get this recognized as a real landmark. It's, you know, it's not just, it's kind of nice. It's a federally designated wild and scenic river, one of only 2 in Florida. It's part of the state aquatic preserve system. That whole area in the lower estuary is all part of that aquatic preserve, which affords special protections. And then the intracoastal waterway to the north is part of the Indian River Lagoon system. So it's a special place that we all get to live in. Today I want to touch on some of the different monitoring programs that we do out of the laboratory, a whole variety of water quality work. We do weekly bacteria testing. If we walked into Publix right now and surveyed people, I think bacteria would be one of the areas that they're most interested in. We have a volunteer water quality program where some folks go out and look at some of the basic parameters each week. And then we have our comprehensive monitoring program that we call Riverkeeper. And we're going out to sites monthly, quarterly, many parameters that we're looking at, and many different sites. And we've partnered with folks at Jupiter, or at the park and other areas there where they're helping us collect samples and bring those in. We also have some instrumentation in the river that helps us really get a careful eye on primarily salinity. Salinity is an important factor with the management of the river to try to understand what's happening with flows and how marine waters are entering into the areas that were historically cypress swamps and more freshwater dominated systems. So that's a big part of the restoration work for the river. We have a couple different seagrass projects, and we've been involved in a variety of oyster work. And obviously we're not doing this work by ourselves. There's other people in the area doing this. Department of Health does sampling for bacteria along the beaches. Du Bois Park, I guess, was closed as of today. Surfrider Foundation does some work on bacteria, Water Management District, and Department of Environmental Protection. Just about everything that I'm presenting to you today is available on our website. You can go, the short version is lrecd.org, and that big prominent Protecting the River button has a whole slew of different things. I really take pride in trying to make everything that we do available to the public in a easy to consume form. So jumping into the bacteria program. So this one is really interesting in the sense that east of I-95, just about well over 99% of all the properties east of 95 are on centralized sewer. So there's no septic systems. Oftentimes you associate bacteria testing with looking for pathogens that are flowing out of septic tanks. In Florida, the water table is really shallow or really high, and you don't have the dry area for septic systems to be effective at providing good treatment, particularly during the dry season or wet season. So when we're looking at bacteria in the waterways, there's a bit of a dilemma, and Jay and I were just chatting that in California, we've interacted with some of their scientists to try to better understand this and be like, look, we don't have septic systems, but we're still seeing high bacteria. How does this work? And they're like, well, what are you worried about? If you don't have septic systems and you don't have septic effluent, you guys are good. But it's not necessarily the case, because there's high bacteria that can come off of the landscape from dog waste. Oddly enough, grass clippings, you put those in a bucket, your bacteria counts for enteric bacteria, which is what we're looking at. And these are whole groups of bacteria, go off the chart. So most of us, I think, feel comfortable letting our kids play in the, on a grassy field, but I think for me as a scientist, the concern starts to be high bacteria in the water, independent of what kind it is something to be taken into account, especially when you have really high counts and you're dealing with kids and people with compromised immune systems. So the fact that we can't point to a bottle of water and say, is that dangerous or not, is kind of frustrating from a science perspective. But I think we're using tools to help us kind of gauge, like, at arm's length, how is this water? So building on EPA's Beach Watch program, which the Department of Health runs for all along the coastal beaches of Florida, there's testing that goes on, including Du Bois Park. We sample the areas that are popular for recreation. And those, as we speak right now, they're collecting this week's sample. And it gives you an idea of what things look like. Last week we had a little bit of elevated concentration at the Tequesta Bridge. And I use this information for my own personal use to gauge, is this a good week for my son and I to go out and go water skiing in the river? When I start seeing that the value that turns that red is 71, which is the EPA's value, the beach action value. It's the same one that the Department of Health and EPA uses. It's a very conservative number. I can tell you it's not until those numbers start getting into the several hundreds that I go, maybe it's not such a good day to go out. And certainly if they go into the thousands, it's like, definitely don't want to be in the water. So again, back to the idea that everything that's on our yards and streets is going into the river, or oftentimes going to the river and causing these increased concentrations of bacteria. Here's a way to kind of know, what's happening out there. The Riverkeeper program, again, much more comprehensive, whole slew of different sites. On the right-hand side, you'll see a whole list of parameters that we've looked at. We may not actively be looking at, for example, sucralose, which is the artificial sweetener, but we've done projects and we made that data available. But we do sample a whole slew of those every month and every quarter throughout the watershed. And we've been doing this since 1991, so it's not like, we've got a handful of samples. We've got thousands upon thousands of samples. One of the neat things that we do is serve this data up on data visualizations on our webpage. And for example, here we've got 3 different types of bacteria, the enteric in the lower left, which is the state's bacteria standard for brackish waters. Then up in the upper right is the E. coli, which is the newer standard, the state standard for fresh waters. And then kind of for historical context, we still do fecal coliform bacteria. And you can see there's some color on there. We're doing some work in Jones Creek trying to understand what's happening there. There's been a whole slew of interesting work to try to improve water quality in that area. And it's good. There's a lot more green, thankfully, than red. And some of those reds are kind of concentrated in areas that we know are compromised, but we're trying to better understand them. So you can select on the left-hand side the month that you're interested in. I roll those into annual summaries so you can look at those. You can zoom in and out of the map. You can hover on an individual data point to see the value, so on and so forth. So in the bottom center there, I show you the page selectors. We've got 12 different pages of maps and things that we show. This one happens to be for the nutrients, summarized on an annualized basis. And it creates a pie chart over the sample size to kind of show you the proportion of samples that meet the water quality standard or fail to meet the state and federal water quality standard. So here we've got nitrogen in the lower left, phosphorus in the upper right, and chlorophyll in the lower right. The chlorophyll standards are super stringent. The folks at EPA, as they were establishing these water quality criteria, said that we had so much data that we basically broke their model. And so they agreed that the super stringent values that they've set for us as far as the water quality standard are probably pretty challenging to meet, but the feeling is they can't recreate the model to work with our data. So we don't put as much stock into things that we see there, although there's times where you see chlorophyll values that are like, whoa, that's we've got some crazy algae cooking in the river. So again, you can select the years, so on and so forth, and be able to see that data. And then if you're really geeking out, You can go to different pages that show you the parameter, select the year, select the station, it'll draw a little chart for you. And again, if you want to see the data a different way, give me a call and we can probably build it. Moving on to the instrumentation, we have in the lower left there a map. You can kind of see we've got 3 stations that I selected on here. One of them is North Bay, which is the furthest down, right below the word Tequesta, just west of the railroad tracks. Further upstream, kind of in the banyan tree area that you may be familiar with as the river starts to narrow a little bit, there's the North Bay, or the North Bay site. No, sorry, other way around. North Bay is just west of the railroad track. Oyster upstream is the banyan tree, and then the Kitchen Creek is well into Jonathan Dickinson State Park. So what we're showing here is the 15-minute observations of salinity. So you can see as the tide fluctuates, you can see the changes in salinity. And this is 2-month period last spring. I grabbed May through June. And you can see that at the Kitchen Creek station, which is the red, we're seeing marine waters come all the way up to that area that should be staying fresh. So anything above 2 PSU, which is on the the scales on the left-hand side, you can see that's not a good thing. If you're a cypress tree seedling, you're struggling because the surrounding area has so much salt in it. But then you can see the rainy season started with a vengeance, and all of a sudden that red line just went pure fresh, and so you see no fluctuation in that. In the middle, we're seeing the oyster area up near the banyan tree. And so you can see that bops around between 20 and 30 during the dry season, then the wet season comes, and now during the outgoing tide, huge swings in salinity. It's truly remarkable how so many organisms that inhabit the oyster reefs can make a living in such a challenging condition, where it's pure fresh almost, and then pure salt, all within a 12-hour, 6-hour period. And then downstream by the railroad tracks, you can see we stay pretty marine. During the dry season, you start to get a little dip, but nothing too crazy. So if you're an organism in a seagrass, if you're going below 15, that starts to get stressful. But you can see here, the black line doesn't go that low. So kind of a neat illustration of just crazy fluctuations in salinity. Jay, do you have a question? Feel free to interrupt. Yeah. So 2 things I hope, 2 take-home messages that I hope you'll take home from my talk with you today is, we get so many, I think so many people in the community just see the brown water and they're like, oh, this water's terrible, it's polluted. And I can tell you that with data sets that go back, 40 years now, we've got thousands of observations that show that brown water is not polluted water. And in fact, we're so fortunate to live here because the watersheds that feed the river are remarkably pristine. Palm Beach County and other agencies have been masters at accumulating South Florida water management, huge areas of land, and that's where this water's coming from. So this picture I took in the inset picture at Riverbend Park, I mean, that's a classic example. What we see is the leaves come out of the trees, they start to decay, the tannins come out, it's just like tea, and then that water is still very high quality, but then ultimately washes into the river. So that's message number 1. Brown water is not polluted water, and we got a heck of a lot of data to support that. The other one is the Loxahatchee River is not connected to Lake Okeechobee. And those two kind of go hand in hand. People are like, oh my gosh, all this brown water. I wish they'd close the locks on Lake Okeechobee. We're not connected to Lake Okeechobee. The C-44 canal is part of the St. Lucie watershed, and it's not like we've got water coming back and forth amongst those. So when you see the S-46 structure, which is back there by Duffy's, open, that's water that's coming from the west and from the south, and Loxahatchee, Slough, and all these other huge natural areas that are discharging really nice clean water to the river. Moving on to seagrass, we have a couple different projects. The patch scale in the upper left, the red dots kind of show some of the sites that we're monitoring. We try to have kind of an upstream, downstream gradient. These aren't the lush, beautiful seagrasses that you may see in Florida Bay or Biscayne Bay or the Bahamas. They're more sparse, they're, kind of diminutive, but the habitat value, no doubt, is still there, right? You can go through, find baby seahorses, you can seine net. We've got decades worth of work that we've done with the Jupiter Environmental Academy folks, doing all kinds of work, catching all kinds of amazing juvenile fish that spend part of their life cycle in the estuary in these habitats. The seagrass story has been disappointing, right? We're going back to 2008 here. It's just been a downward trend. We have some glimmer of hope. That middle chart is kind of the overall trend of all the sites. The bottom chart is the time series of the different sites. The two that fell totally out of the chart there are the two most upstream sites. So our feeling is that the amount of rainfall, when you look at a historical record of the annualized rainfall, we've been in a period of increased rainfall, definitely not a drought on an annualized basis. So last year, that started to shift around where we had less rainfall than we've had in many years prior. So maybe is that part of the increase that we're seeing? So we're somewhat encouraged by that and hope it at least, stops going down so fast. The other project we do every few years is the landscape scale, where we go out and basically shotgun blast the entire estuary in water depths that we think may support seagrasses. And you get an idea, the green are continuous, or a big 9 by 9 or a 3 by 3 meter quadrant is covered, has grasses in all the individual cells, and then patchy, kind of a mix, and then sparse, maybe only 1 or 2 or 3 of the cells in the 9 square meter quadrant have grass. So you can see there's some outliers way up in the Northwest Fork. There's a few areas of some sprigs of seagrass that we may encounter, but most of it's down in the lower estuary in the areas that you would expect with the nice clear water that we see, particularly in the summer. So obviously a lot going on here, and with regard to the causes of this, I think most likely it's a combination of many factors and disease and who knows what else is going on. But certainly the relationship to the rainfall and the amount of fresh water that's coming into the system has got to be an important one. The organics and muck that I'll touch on here in a few minutes is another one. Areas that are just, you sink up to your knees and just ooze, and obviously seagrasses can't make a living there. Sand accumulation in the lower estuary, I think, is another one. We've seen, we've documented increases in the elevation of areas that now are experienced to more exposed areas during low tide. And 30, 40 years ago, a 25-foot Mako was a big boat, and nowadays that's a whole different game. I mean, the wake that a 40-foot center console throws is very different from from an energy standpoint than a small boat. So we see that as evidence with scour and the erosion kind of in that photo. So interestingly, we're seeing changes though in seagrasses all throughout the state and elsewhere. The International Union of Conservation of Nature did a study years ago where they documented worldwide kind of an average of 7% seagrass loss globally. When you annualize that big long trend chart, 7%. It's crazy. So hopefully we're turning things around and it's getting better. Touching on oysters, they're amazing, have an amazing capacity to filter water, but I think the more interesting aspect is the biological value with regard to habitat value. My favorite expression is every nook and cranny of an oyster reef is a critter condominium, and it's so true. We can take our aluminum boat, and there's so much life with an activity with like pistol shrimp and all kinds of organisms making noise that you can actually hear it through the deck of the boat when you pull over it. So again, amazing number. In the Loxahatchee, we've documented over 300 species. We had a partnership with scientists at FIU for a period of time. Historically widespread throughout the estuary. There's pictures of mining oyster reef off the sandbar that's in the central embayment. the Jupiter Inlet District did a project to improve water quality where they removed and dredged oysters near the railroad tracks. I mean, it's just like, we look back and it's so interesting how things got so twisted around. But nonetheless, we still have some healthy beds, particularly in further upstream than they were historically, and that's probably a function of how the inlet is managed, because it's wider and deeper and more marine water's coming through, so that area that we showed you on the LIAISON data with the big fluctuations in salinity is further upstream now. We did some restoration projects years ago where we did a pilot project looking, we felt like that, we're in an area we know can support oysters. We put bagged oyster shell beneath residential docks that worked with us, and those areas flourished. We did that in coordination with the Nature Conservancy and then the high school's Environmental Academy. A couple years later, we were able to take it really big scale and did a large-scale restoration project, again, kind of in that banyan tree area, because we knew there was a high probability of success because that's where the best oysters in the river were, and was able to build, acres and acres of this. Pretty amazing experience to take a fossilized shell or an oyster shell from a restaurant. We were able to get some shell that came up as part of the beach nourishment project on one of the Juneau Beach Nourishment Project, and use that as the culch is the term that is used for that. And literally in the span of a few months, the colonization and the growth of oysters is pretty remarkable. So, fun project. Ultimately, we ended up with, these areas. We did a little experimental project in the red that promptly, unfortunately, sunk into that ooze and muck that I was telling you about. The sites 13 and 14 are flourishing, especially 13. I think there's better flow through that area, and it's gone gangbusters. And then the yellow dots show the docks that we worked with the property owners on that. One last thing I wanted to touch on was, while we're really fortunate to enjoy some, a good, healthy river, the DEP and the EPA have a program where they're going around and testing watersheds all throughout the state of Florida as part of, their efforts to make sure that we're complying with the Clean Water Act and various other things. And so, to be able to, as part of those assessments, we have impairments in the Loxahatchee River for bacteria, for dissolved oxygen, for various things, depending on which little area that we're looking at. So several years ago, DEP approached us, and fortunately, there's a very organized group of stakeholders for the Loxahatchee River and their legislative assigned council that the Village of Tequesta is a member, but it's called the Loxahatchee River Management Coordinating Council. So because DEP had an audience of all the stakeholders in one room to start with, they said, hey, can you help foster this process that helps hopefully drive getting these different water bodies to restoration. And you may have heard of the TMDL program, which is a pretty heavy-handed approach to where the state comes in and sets targets and then goes through the process. The Management Coordinating Council and DEP agreed to work on a kinder and gentler approach, if you will, through what's called a reasonable assurance plan. And so we went through, documented all the projects that have recently been completed, what monitoring work's going on, and with this effort of, this is the pollution reduction plan that we're all collectively working towards to make progress, and hopefully get to that point where the river system is no longer impaired. So this, each year I compile the list for the submittal to the state, and there's, dozens and dozens of projects that are underway that hopefully will help provide those improvements. Interestingly, one of them is that that the town of Jupiter is doing is, like the Village of Tequesta, they currently discharge their reverse osmosis byproducts to the river in the Southwest Fork. And so I didn't appreciate the amount of nitrogen in that discharge. It's a real number. And so I think the town of Jupiter being proactive said, you know, regulatory wise, this probably isn't gonna fly in the future, and they've built a deep well, or they're in the process of building a deep injection well, very expensive project, very complicated, but it's gonna be their discharge site, and so that's gonna result in a huge reduction in nitrogen loading, which it'll be interesting to see if they get the predicted response and improvement to water quality. So the other area is with regard to stormwater. And so here I'm taking off my district hat, and I wanna come to you as a resident, and I feel like there's some things that we can be doing collectively, you know, even partner-wise. I mean, I send out 34,000 bills every quarter on the sewer bill side. Maybe there's ways to help educate the public. But the stormwater systems in so many communities in our area were designed with one thing in mind: get the water off the landscape as quickly as possible, right? There's no treatment. That stormwater drain in the upper right is in front of my yard, and when the lot was vacant for a period of time across the street, my son was little, and he'd shout into into that storm drain, and you could hear it echo out across the river, because the drain literally goes straight out to the river there. And so in this type of design system, again, these were all installed in probably the 60s, you know, it's getting the water off the landscape. So all the grass clippings that we see residents and landscape workers blowing straight into the storm drain system, which we know are loaded with bacteria, leaf debris, dirt, has crazy amounts of nitrogen in it, dog waste, all the fluids dripping out of cars, so on and so forth. All that stuff is going straight to the river. And so I really feel like there's some opportunities here to try to make some improvements. And I think one of the things that I want to try to do is try to help people make the connection between what's going in your storm drain and what you will find in the river with regard to these organic sediments, which are a biological dead zone, right? It's like hydrogen sulfide, you know, bacteria is about the only thing that you got going there. And so the seagrasses can't live in it, very few organisms do. And so I think helping people understand what's going into that storm drain is contributing to this sources of these muck sediments. And it's not the only reason, right? There's other biochemical things going on, but there's this great analogy of the pollution pie, right? And imagine your pie chart of different sources of pollution. You know, so many things that are going in the storm drain are things that we can do stuff about, right? Whether it's figuring out ways to improve the swales so water's not running straight to it, various other things. So again, you know, this system was designed to move water quickly. You know, the elevations within our neighborhood is such to get the water to the storm drain, and then that storm drain goes out. Up on the upper one there, you can see that little delta forming. That shows that meaningful amounts of sediment are coming out through there. Further off this map is yet another one, and you can see there's a good accumulation of sand there. That's the coarse sediment. Think of, you know, all the fine sediments that were with these that then just went out into the river, settled out, and now are helping contribute to those organic rich, the mucky sediments. So you don't have to look far to figure out where this stuff is coming from, right? These are pictures that I've taken in my neighborhood, driving home from work, who knows what. You know, when they're coming in, working on sites, you know, within the neighborhood, there's little to no turbidity controls. You've got leaves, dirt, debris. There's evidence of people dropping paint, pouring paint in there, trash. You get the idea. We really, I think, need to try to improve what's happening here and help people understand the significance of it. This one's so classic, right? The emblem that is on each of the storm drains is so big, so covered in paint, you can't even tell what it says anymore. This one was a curious story. You know, I sent it off to the village staff, and you know, the homeowner, the developer rather, wrote the most scathing email back. is that, this is not a problem, and the village staff should be working on other stuff that's more important with regard to trying to protect the river. I'm telling you, from a science perspective, you got paint and grout and dirt, and who knows what the pump was discharging, and all these things that literally are going straight to the river. This is fundamentally wrong, and I hope that we can all work together to try to improve it. Another example that I see every day, I'm gonna drive home from work, big construction project at this house that's been going on for well over a year. And, during a rainstorm, that area, shows a 6-foot wide swath of water that's just running straight to the nearest storm drain and then going out to the river. And again, you got the coarse sediments that are settling out fast, but then you got a whole slew of fines that are going out and contributing to that poor water quality. So my challenge is this. I hope that the village of Tequesta can work towards being a leader in the whole stormwater arena. I have an uncle who lives in Kentucky, but he also has a place in Sanibel Island. And I feel like, I don't know who's led the charge over there, but his depth of knowledge as it relates to stormwater issues and water quality issues is mind-boggling. They got it right. I mean, they were leaders in the whole fertilizer ordinance, where he's like militant with his landscape crews about what they're gonna do, when they're gonna do it, how much they're gonna use on his yard, all these different things. And to be able to build that culture of appreciation for the river and the environment in this area would be helpful, I think. The Loxahatchee River District, we'd love to partner. Our town of Jupiter is in the same situation with the older communities and all these opportunities for figuring out ways to educate the public, but then try to improve it. I think on the residents, it's so easy, it's human nature to say, oh, that's not our problem. We're not causing that problem. But we are, right? Whether it's our landscape crews or ourselves, I'm shocked by every time I cut my grass how much dog waste is still in there. Some people pick it up, right? But others don't. And that literally is going straight to the river in the next rainstorm. The construction site stuff, that one, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity there. What if, with people getting assigned a permit, they got handed a shiny sheet that said, listen, these things are unacceptable in the village of Tequesta. You need turbidity controls, you need to manage the site properly. And then being able to have the monitoring and the enforcement. When somebody's doing something wrong, that there's swift and severe consequences. Right now, it doesn't seem to be the case. And we could hop in the car right now and go for a ride and see numerous instances of that. And then lastly, I do want to shout out, I'm disappointed Marjorie's not here, because I wanted to give a shout out to her crew and the storm. I don't know what happened in the past with regard to the funds that were collected as part of the stormwater fees, but they weren't going to rehabilitation, but now they are. Again, tip of the hat to the senior management here at the village. I had a pipe collapse, the stormwater pipe that ran right through the side of my yard collapsed, caused a big sinkhole. They've lined all those pipes now, so they're functioning as they should. Something that I think has been interesting that the town of Jupiter did was the swale restoration. I think in many of our neighborhoods, the grass has grown up over the decades, and so now when the rain comes, it can't flow off the road into the swale like you see in the lower right photo there, because there's that ledge of grass. So it kind of forms a river and then it goes straight to the storm drain. There's tons of grant opportunities. The state has an amazing water quality improvement grants. We have impairments, documented impairments. We have a reasonable assurance plan. All those things help with scoring. Partnerships, again, gladly contribute to that from monitoring standpoint, whatever. I think there's opportunities. And then it's required, right? The village of Tequesta is part of the municipal stormwater blah, blah, blah system, which is the MS4, and the National Pollution Elimination System, it's NPDES. So the town of Jupiter, village of Tequesta, all these different stormwater utilities participate in this Palm Beach County-wide effort. That's the website under the NPDES. They're permitted to operate their stormwater system, but part of that permit has requirements for compliance with the Clean Water Act. And so rules that are on the village code are designed to help support that. There's rules at the state and federal level. There's teeth, right? This doesn't have to be like, oh, well, we can't really enforce it. Heck yeah, there's plenty of opportunities for enforcement. So I challenge everybody to do it. I want to tip the hat to whoever was involved with this. I got to tell you, I was so excited when I opened the smoke signals last month and saw these figures. I mean, this is a great start. We're helping people understand that it's not like other areas of the country where the storm drain and the sewer system are connected. It's separate here, right? Loxahatchee River District's treating the wastewater coming out of your house. Storm drains, unfortunately, are going straight to the river. But let's help the public make the connection between that storm drain, bacteria in the river. I mean, most of our kids, and we were just joking the other night, my kid used to hop off the bus in elementary school and run and jump straight in the river and go and have fun, right? I mean, we want that for our kids and grandkids and friends. So let's make the connection between the storm drain, the river bacteria, the vegetation going in there, causing these types of things, dirt, trash, all that stuff contributing to the muck, right? If we show people the muck or talk about bacteria, those are two things I think that really speak to folks. All right, last but not least, another program that's really been interesting that we're involved with is wastewater surveillance during COVID. We were able to get engaged very early on with a company that was leading the charge, testing for fragments of COVID at the molecular level in our wastewater stream. And so you know what's happening in your community with regard to different illnesses. So there's the BioBot team that we did, that we work with, but then Verily, which is a life sciences division of Alphabet, which used to be Google, partnered with scientists from Stanford and Emory, and they have expanded this to look at all kinds of different illnesses. And so we're part of that program. Every week we're collecting 3 samples. Monday, Wednesday, Friday we collect samples for the wastewater scan program. And then the BioBot program is once a week too. So we have different sources. It's fun to kind of see the different methodologies, provide different results. Up in the upper left there, you can change the time series. Right now we're looking at 6 months worth of data. You can see, watch COVID run in the community. Had a good run of influenza A this year. Last year we had a good run of influenza B. And to me, it's fun to watch this information and to be able to kind of be tuned in to what's happening. And when some of these things are running, it's like, well, maybe we'll eat in tonight rather than going out to a busy restaurant. And so it's kind of cool information that we're doing.
That's on the Loxahatchee.
And it's on the Loxahatchee River District website, and there's a red and white box right now, and it's called wastewater surveillance. You can get to it there. So with that,
Awesome, thank you.
I'll entertain any questions if you want.
Questions?
I do.
I'm interested in that last thing. So when you take the samples, is that just a sort of one unit, one time sample, or is it like an ongoing where you can really kind of monitor it?
Right, so it's a 24-hour, we have a sampling device that samples, it's a flow proportion sample. So everything that comes into our wastewater treatment plant for 24 hours is basically captured in that sample. And then we send that off. And so then they're looking for the fragments of those different pathogens that identify that. And so we shed huge volumes of these pathogens, and then those fragments then are picked up in the wastewater stream. It's pretty remarkable stuff.
So the photos that you showed of it was like 2 different homes in Tequesta that were under construction.
Yeah.
I've seen many projects in different places in Florida and elsewhere where,
No, that's fine.
where the perimeter of the project area has like a little fence made of plastic or something to keep debris from flowing like into a water body or to the neighbor or onto the street.
Right.
Are you aware of any other local governments in this area doing that sort of thing, and particularly when the property is on the water? It
Yeah.
seems like something barrier like that would be helpful.
Absolutely. And I haven't studied the village code, but I would expect that some level of turbidity control for the property is probably already there.
Yeah.
And so it's not there's many ways to help manage this, right? There's companies that have developed devices that you put in the storm drains to help prevent things from going into it. We did a project with the town of Jupiter that has some of these installed. I can tell you that, you know, they're helpful, right? But they require maintenance, and are they overwhelmed during the big storms? You know, there's always a concern about the storm drain not functioning properly because of a device in it to help prevent the dirt and all the other stuff going into the system. So there's some that are designed just for construction, and that's all part of those best management practices. That's a requirement. And so whether it's, you know, different devices around the property with silk fence or things to protect the storm drains, or both, that's all part of that.
Yeah, I noticed the storm drains, I mean, in other places I worked, we would require, in that circumstance, for the storm drain to be surrounded by a filtration bags.
Right.
That, you know, helped.
Right.
Maybe not absolutely perfect, but it's better than nothing that I
Sure.
saw in those photos.
Right.
And I just want to share something with everybody, and I'll shut up. About exactly 35 years ago, I was went for a walk in Weinheim, Germany, okay? And being the public works nerd that I am, I looked at the storm drains as I was walking, and I looked closer and closer, and I realized you could remove the bars that kept people's feet from going into the drain. And you know, on a swimming pool, how they have the skimmer
Yeah.
and the thing. They literally have in every one a brass skimmer bat that they pull up, and it was so small that, you know, it was smaller than the baskets you use on your swimming pool.
Right.
So I asked my brother-in-law, I said, what? He said, well, every time it rains, the city comes and cleans out those bucket things. That's 35 years ago.
Right.
That's kind of what we need to be doing right now.
Right. And again, back to Marjorie, I wish she was here to understand, like, what things are they struggling with, right? Is it people going to council saying, do you guys really gonna bust my chops about this? I don't know, right? You know, hopefully council supports this kind of idea and says, hey, let's try to be like Sanibel, where it's common knowledge, and folks are, you know, embrace the opportunity to protect the amazing river that we get to all enjoy, so.
Yeah, we need stricter enforcement in things even beyond the environment.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but, you know, I always believed in it. I think the saying is something like, walk softly and carry a big stick. I mean, so, you know, you can be nice, you can say this is how it should be done, this is what the code says, and if you get any back talk, then out comes the big stick.
Right.
And that's just, I can't believe that developer told our people to take a hike.
In a very colorful manner.
And that's just unacceptable.
Right.
But thanks for letting me know about it.
Yeah. And two, I think it's one of these things where decades ago, I would come home from college, and man, Tequesta had the reputation is you don't speed 2 miles an hour over the speed limit because you'll get a ticket.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just the mindset in the community. It's like, man, the second you round into Tequesta, look out. They're gonna. Why not have a similar type of thing for developers that come and do work here, that how they need to manage their work site,
Yes.
as well as residents that sit there and blow all the grass and leaves and other debris straight into the storm drain, right? I mean, I think in many cases, it's just like they didn't have a clue of like, oh, you mean that connects and goes right there? And then back to the picture of the organic sediments and muck, that it's like, hey, if we want to keep that out, we need to keep this out of the storm drain. So.
If I can jump in real quick, we do have a new building official since probably the last time, or since that encounter happened. And we do have a construction site maintenance manual that the building department manages. I don't deal with it, so I can't share enough, but I can have Wayne, the building official, come here. And I texted Marjorie to come in, so she's here. I'm trying to get Wayne to come in too, but I don't think he's in the office.
I do have a question. But when you mentioned the Jupiter's new well for the discharge, what are your thoughts on Tequesta's discharge? Like, how do you?
So I haven't done the math on that to know
Okay.
the significance of it, talking about Town of Jupiter's deep well as it relates to the reasonable assurance plan. So, it's one of those that, you know, again, it's a mathematical calculation. You know, there's a phrase, dilution is the solution, right? The Tequesta's discharge site is on, or at least was on the US 1 bridge.
Okay.
And, you know, we know there's a heck of a lot of water moving through there. But at the end of the day, there's, based on the calculations for the town of Jupiter's, and they're granted a different scale than the village, but the numbers were staggering on how much nitrogen's in that water. And so, back to the long-term planning, how are we gonna manage this? What's gonna be allowed from a regulatory standpoint? You know, is it one of those that down the road, 20 years from now, it used to be like, you know, wastewater treatment plants could discharge their treated water offshore. Well, you can't do that anymore, right? So is the village gonna be in a situation where they can't discharge their RO water? I mentioned it in the context of, it was striking to me how much nitrogen was in there. And if that nitrogen gets removed, the reassurance plan models show that the impairments in the river should go away, and we should be in really even better shape than we already are.
So it's something we really should start talking about, I think, for Tequesta for the future.
It seems like it would be prudent, right?
Thank you.
No. So,
I'm not aware that we're
Marjorie, I
putting any
think
nitrogen.
part of the question, so I came here wearing two hats, right? One of them is a concerned resident with the opportunities for improvements on stormwater. And my plea to them is to hopefully engage council to support staff so that you guys can get the enforcement stick that you may need on some of these commercial properties or development properties that are under development. And then there's other things that I feel like we can all be doing to help educate the public. And to me, there's two areas that I feel like we can get some traction. One is with regard to educating people about what goes in the storm drain results in muck and organic sediments, or a part of that results in muck and organic sediments in the river, which then cascades to seagrasses and all these other things. And then the other one is bacteria, right? So many of our kids play in the river. If we survey people in Publix, bacteria are a concern. And so when the grass clippings go in, that crazy cool study where this guy literally took a handful of grass and put it in a bucket, and the bacteria counts go off the chart. That's part of maybe what's, you know, driving what we're seeing in the river. So helping staff have the support that they need to be able to make improvements on construction sites and on these other things. I guess, right? I mean,
That's
good
good
I
summary.
shared with them, I expressed that I brought the one site to your attention and the scathing email that you shared with me from the person who happens to live on the river. It just baffles me, people's mentality and their lack of responsibility and willingness to try to do the right thing.
Yeah, we were the bad guys.
But if you can hang out just for a little bit, I have a couple more questions, but.
I just stepped out because I thought there was a question that you could maybe answer.
What was the question that you?
I think Bud said he wished Marjorie was here.
Is there things that they can do to help support you, I guess, to have a bigger stick?
Oh. We'll talk about that. The answer is maybe.
Yeah.
Probably, I feel like we've got support from this group in the past, for sure.
I think the enforcement side's our building official, because he's the one that
He is
manages
the
the construction sites. So what I can do is do a follow-up at the next EAC meeting, and I'll have him come. You'll already be here for another
Yeah, I'll be
presentation.
here for another presentation.
So we could have some kind of follow-up with them about the enforcement side, if you guys want to have that.
Yeah.
So we do the inspections for the stormwater, and if our, like my team member went out and looked, when we got the complaint from Bud, and looked at, and then let the building official, because the building official is really the only one that can cite, that has the authority to cite them. But we'll inspect, we can inspect it and bring to the attention of the building official in an official capacity.
Great,
For sure.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So-
Michelle.
Just a quick question. First of all, thank you so much. You're very articulate in conveying your expansive knowledge to us as laymen for this field, and appreciate the time. And education is always something that I always fall into right away, as the more times a person sees a piece of information or marketing or whatever, the more we can ingrain it into a culture. So from our perspective as a committee, to maybe recommend from council is to continue with what you just showed in smoke signals, but also to maybe target and extend that information to our COAs and HOAs in the village, so that they will reprint it again in their newsletters and communications, and any other opportunities that would come across the village may have, that we can keep conveying that, because just that visual on that one graphic with the stormwater, I don't think a lot of people, like you said, realize
Yeah.
where does that drain go? Nowhere. Quick question, pool drainage. When people have to drain their pools and I see that hose going right down into that chlorinated water, that can't be a good,
Right.
but
So-
does it dissipate fast enough in the river to not create an issue?
There's the legal side and then my opinion side. So the legal side, and I looked into this with DEP, the permit, your NPDES permit, says that it has to be non-chlorinated.
Has to be
Non-chlor-
non what?
non-chlorinated.
Non-
Okay.
So what you can do is neutralize the chlorine in your pool and then discharge it. That's the perfect way to do it.
Okay, that's a good piece to also
Right.
communicate.
Doesn't,
If it's low
doesn't-
concentrated chlorine,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
again, I can't imagine that's having a bad effect, right? Even some low flowing pump, I mean, again, it's not one that freaks me out compared to like a whole bucket full of grout and paint being poured into the.
Yeah, that's bad.
Doesn't,
Okay.
doesn't your agency require a permit to
No.
discharge it into the sewer system?
Oh, to the sewer system, yeah.
Okay.
So that, some of those bigger pumps can quickly overwhelm our system. And so that's where there needs to be coordination. I think the easiest thing is to neutralize the chlorine in it or let it go to a very low level.
Yeah.
And then just, you can discharge it to storm. I think that's actually DEP's recommendation. And to send it to the wastewater treatment plant is, more cumbersome.
Right.
John?
Oh, good, yep.
Okay. So the slide about dirty water isn't polluted water. So I know a few people that live along the water and have lived there for 40, 50 plus years.
Yeah.
And the one thing they consistently tell me is, man, back whatever in the 60s and 70s, the water was so clear.
Right.
So if it's not pollution and it's tannins or whatever, is the tannin level increasing, or is it runoff and the pollutants that come with that runoff?
So I can tell you from a water quality perspective that the overwhelming majority of the time, we could go test anything in the most, any time of year. And during outgoing tide, and that water quality is pretty decent, right? So I think the whole idea of, the water used to be different, I'm not so sure. I mean, we go back, our data set goes back to 1991. So I can tell you though that from the perspective of water clarity, there's different things happening, right? There are times where, you may have an interface with the fresh water and the salt water, and it causes a precipitation and makes the water appear more cloudy, right? And that's another source for muck. I'll acknowledge that it's not all grass clippings and dirt coming off of construction sites. There's other biological processes, biochemical processes that cause that. But again, we can't fix that. We can't change that aspect of the pollution pie, if you will. So back to the whole idea, you can have situations where groundwater's coming in, has sulfur in it. That sulfur water encounters the salt water and then causes almost a white precipitate and cloudiness to the water. So again, there's a whole slew of different things going on. I don't think historically there's been any profound changes in many of those things going on. And again, I think when you look at an aerial view, there's so many huge natural areas, Corbett, all those areas. I mean, thousands and thousands of acres. That's where the majority of water that's coming into the river system is coming from during the wet season.
Yeah. Okay. So the oyster restoration, where you, I guess, seeded or tried to restore by putting oysters under private property docks.
Yeah.
How did you go about doing that?
That was-
And is it like knocking on doors or?
And was it effective? Like, can we do it again?
Yeah, so it was effective. It was a crazy social experiment, right? We literally partnered with the Nature Conservancy, which is, I mean, a hugely worldwide recognized good environmental agency. They were the ones who knocked on the door because we thought, oh, if we try that, it probably may not go as well. So in many cases, people were like, no thanks, I don't want, I've got no interest in that. Some people would have interest, but they didn't want, the biggest complaint, we had lots of people express interest, but the biggest concern is that they didn't want to encumber future homeowners. And it's a legitimate concern. We actually work with the permitting agencies to be like, listen, can we make a clause in this permit that says when they go to restore their dock, that they can impact this resource to rebuild their dock. And of course that was like moving mountains. So again, knocking on doors, telling people, hey, here's an opportunity. It was a cool project, students were involved, the whole thing. But there were challenges to get the number of properties we got because of the concern about encumbering future owners and future, dock repairs and stuff.
That's a legitimate one.
All right. No more questions, right? Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was excellent, Bud.
Yeah, that was excellent.
Okay, next presentation, Sue Panella, co-founder and president of the Jupiter Narrows Conservatory. I'm sorry. Alliance. Just an update to shoreline restoration efforts in the Jupiter Narrows. Thank
Great.
you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I think last time I spoke with you all, I was on Zoom. So it's nice to see you all in person. I don't know, were you all part of that last presentation? Okay.
I was.
Okay, so I'll go quickly through the context and the background, and what I really want to focus on is an update of where we are on permitting and fundraising, as well as community building, because this really is a community-led effort, and it's one of the things we're most proud of in terms of building and expanding our community. So just context, we are north of Cato's Bridge on the east side of the Intercoastal Waterway, from the bridge up to the southern part of Coral Cove Park. We're directly across from the Bureau of Land Management project, the Jupiter Inlet Lighthouse Outstanding Natural Area. And this is significant because we are using the same engineering firm, Taylor Engineering, who I've mentioned before. We have had conversations with Peter DeWitt, and he has indicated that if we're in the water with our project at the same time as what they're doing in that area, there might be some opportunities for some economies of sharing some mobilization and so forth. So it's a really great opportunity. And the fact is, it's all one ecosystem. So the permitters who are looking at our permits right now at the DEP and the Army Corps are the same reviewers that permitted the project right across the way. So they're very familiar with the waterway, they're familiar with the traffic, the bathymetrics, the hydrology, and by the way, I'm not a scientist, so these are all kind of new terms for me. Let me just, as a little bit of background, this is an area that's been important to me and my family for over 55 years. My grandmother was on the Loxahatchee River back in the early 60s, so I've been coming down here since I was 5, I think, and now have the good fortune to be right there on the intercoastal. It was about 4 years ago I pulled out these pictures that are in the top row. looking right out at the time of my dad's unit and now my brother's unit. We're upstairs. And what I was looking at compared to that was so striking. And I had just retired, and I said, you know what? I've got the time. Something's got to be done. I got to pick up the phone and call some people. We also looked further back in history, and from 77 to 2022, you can see, I mean, that whole area, actually, if you look back at the pictures from the 50s, that whole area was mangroves. And even from 77 to 2022, you can see where we've almost lost all of what's there. There's very little left. We're focusing on what we're calling three islands, the northernmost one that's already now split, and even since 2022, that's even in worse shape. The middle one, where the second yellow arrow is, and then way down by the bridge, what used to be a very, very robust island is now just a pile of sticks. I'll show you a picture in a minute. So I picked up the phone. I said, I'm just a passionate resident. I really don't know what I'm talking about. I've got to call some conservation experts. So I called anybody and everybody who had expertise here. And Fish and Wildlife Foundation, FWC and Palm Beach County came out, snorkeled around the area, and agreed that something had to be done, that this is a really valuable ecosystem. I mean, you all know how popular that area is. It's popular for a very good reason. There's just a tremendous amount of wildlife, beautiful pristine waters, and just an area that we have to save. We had a meeting with residents. Actually, Tom, you came to that meeting way back in, I think it was 3 years ago, at our building to educate the residents about how important it is to save the ecosystem of mangroves and seagrasses. If you were to go out there now and look, actually this was last year, these pictures. This is what the people from FWC and Palm Beach County saw, but these islands look like they've been hit by a hurricane. I mean, it is astounding how quickly they're going. And I look out there every day, and it's like we cannot waste any time because they're going to be gone. So I realized after talking to FWC and Palm Beach County, they said, we're willing to guide you and help you, but you're better off doing this independently because you'll go a lot faster, and honestly, time is of the essence. So I said, one of the big learnings for me was, okay, now I really need help because I don't know what I'm doing. So the community grew. I really focused on finding people who could work with us, who know what they're talking about, in addition to those other agencies I just mentioned. But I was very lucky to be introduced to J.P. Brooker, who is the Florida director of the Ocean Conservancy. They're based in they're based in Washington, D.C. They're the largest nonprofit devoted to ocean conservation in the country, the oldest. And so JP took a look at this project and he said, I really think there's something here, because if a community-led effort like this can succeed, it can be replicated in other areas of the Indian River Lagoon and beyond in Florida. So JP and I co-founded the Jupiter Narrows Conservation Alliance. We incorporated last January and immediately hired Taylor Engineering to come in and start doing the requisite scientific data collection to really understand what's here, what can be done to save it, and what are the best ways to save it. So Taylor Engineering has been a tremendous partner. They are currently in the permitting process, and I'll get into that in just a bit, but I want to highlight two other partners. One is the Village of Tequesta. We're incredibly grateful for the support that initially you all gave us, and then the council also gave us in terms of a unanimous letter of support. And now we've been working with Jay and his team on a public-private partnership to apply for some grants. We applied for, or the village applied for, the Coastal Partnership Initiative grant through the DEP. We got an indication that we're on a short list, but unfortunately that's federal money right now that's being held up, so we're just not sure where that's going, but we're very hopeful. And we're looking for other opportunities, so we're really incredibly thankful for the support from the Village of Tequesta. There's other areas where I think we can partner, and I'll talk to them a little bit as we go on. One is, as Bud was talking about, just educating the population about being responsible stewards of this area, and I'll get into that a bit. But Another partnership I want to mention is the Andrew Red Harris Foundation. I don't know if you're all familiar with them. They're based out of Jupiter. It's about a 10-year-old foundation, and it was established 10 years ago after their son Andrew was tragically killed in a snorkeling accident in the Jupiter Inlet. They established this foundation to honor Andrew's love of the water, and he happened to live for the last couple of years of his life in one of the condos that was looking directly at these mangroves. So their primary mission is, to, I'm not gonna remember all the words, but basically preserving the marine ecosystem. But their primary activity has been establishing artificial offshore reefs. So there's a couple miles of offshore reefs off of Jupiter and Juno, thanks to the Andrew Red Harris Foundation. But their donors came to them and said, you know what, we'd love to see something inshore, because not all of us scuba dive, so we'd like to see something that we can touch and feel and see. And so about 7 years ago, Scott Harris, the dad, did a white paper on these very islands that we're trying to save, and put together pictures and really started researching what it would take to save them. Long story short, he didn't have the bandwidth to do it. So the fact that we were introduced to each other a little over a year ago was really fortuitous, because they have since committed all of their fundraising dollars from last year and this year to our project, a minimum of $175,000. What we're trying to do on our side is we would really like to name the islands the Andrew Red Harris Islands. Apparently Andrew was a really upstanding young man. I've talked to people who lived in the building with him, and I just think it would be such a great community tribute to a young man who was very well known in the community. The lands are state-owned lands, so it's complicated naming the islands. We have been in touch with Senator Harrell, Representative Snyder, and we are working the formal channels. We also want to work the informal channels, and we know there are a lot of areas around the country where informally people can start calling things by a certain name. So that's one of the areas as well where we think the Village of Tequesta could help us. We did talk to Mayor Young about it. She presented it briefly to council. We really didn't get into the whole background with them, and I think their first thought was, it's state-owned land, we really don't have any business trying to name it. What we'd love to come back with, through your help and through council's help, is even just an informal proclamation or a letter of support saying we would support the state naming these islands the Andrew Red Harris Islands. So stay tuned on that. We're also working with Palm Beach County on the same effort for the naming. So let me go to the plan. The plan that Taylor Engineering has put together is to install 3 natural limestone breakwaters between the navigational channel and the remaining islands that are there. It would include a 3-year-long monitoring plan with the potential to add on more monitoring over time to prove the success. And then the third component is awareness and education, which we've already started, and again, where I think there's an opportunity to partner more specifically with the village. And I'll go into these in more detail. The breakwaters would be, again, between the navigational channel and the islands, and they would be far enough away from, they're designed such that you could still get, manatees could still swim behind them, kayakers, paddleboarders could still get behind them at high tide, obviously, because at low tide not much of anything can get behind there. But and in addition to the breakwaters, they've designed what's called a tow protection right at the base of the mangroves to provide some extra stability. And then there's an opportunity where the elevations are appropriate to plant additional mangroves. And I'll talk about what the proposed outcomes are in a moment. But what these would look like would be very similar to what you've seen south of the lighthouse and also up in the Loxahatchee River at Bird Island, or what it's called Bird Island. And I show these pictures because the top one, if you all remember what those mangroves looked like south of the lighthouse, they were really starting to fail as well, and now they've come back and they're quite robust, just with a little bit of protection from the wave action. And then in Bird Island, Taylor Engineering has done seagrass surveys there for the last 5 years, and they've seen an 860% increase in seagrass, which is really remarkable. And that's what we would expect to see, something like that in our project. So again, what we would be looking for is we'd be stabilizing, basically stabilizing the root system and the sediment underneath the mangroves by reducing the wave energy. We've talked to Taylor, and they're in turn talking to the permitters about the impact of the lower speed limit. Let me be really clear, it will certainly help, it will not save the islands, because as you talked before about these big boats, you get a big boat on a slow speed, and they're plowing through the water. They're not up on planes, so there are some enormous wakes that even at slow speed won't be blocked completely, or they need to be blocked. We're looking at about almost 2 acres of seagrass increase, and obviously it would certainly enhance the fishing and recreational values and marine productivity. That area, I look out there every day, and I gotta tell you, even now, as measly as those mangroves look, I still see an incredible amount of wildlife down there. It's rays, sharks, manatees, it's really remarkable, so we can't afford to lose it. I'll just show you really quickly the data that Taylor shared with us. This was on the left in 2019, right when the breakwaters were built. The colors you see is where the seagrass was. A year later, you can see there's quite a bit more seagrass. A year after that, even more, and then you go 5 years out, and like I said, they've seen an 60-something% increase in seagrass. And not just on the backside of the breakwaters, but also on the other side. And I'm sure, Bud, you could probably tell us why more than I can, but it is remarkable just when you kind of calm down the area, what can happen. And
So,
what I've...
I'm
yep.
sorry to interrupt.
Yep. Mhm.
So in this picture, all of the seagrass seems to be growing over here. Why not here? I believe it's pretty similar as far as the depth, and could that be because people are trampling around back there? Because I see it all the time.
You know what,
Yeah.
honestly,
Okay.
I wish I could answer. That's a good question. I can ask Taylor Engineering. I don't know, Ben, you might be able to chime in there.
That area's a little shallower.
Is it?
Yeah, I believe so.
It looks shallower.
All right, I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
no, good question.
We need about 18 to 28 inches of water to really do seagrass well.
Okay.
So, in terms of the awareness, all of the condos along there put their own nickel in too, and bought signs and banners to put up on their private property, just to say caution, there's fragile ecosystem around here. And I'm happy to say I've heard from a lot of people through our website who saw these signs and reached out to find out what we're doing. So some people are paying attention, they're noticing, we're trying to build awareness. The other thing we want to do, and we're in the middle of getting permits, is to put some informational buoys. If you notice, so I don't have a pointer here, but there's the 2 islands further north, and then there's that whole area that used to be mangroves that's no longer mangroves. There's a lot of seagrass in there. It is very sparse, but there is a lot of seagrass in there. And that's where, right now, there's a lot of boats that park. And that's fine, it's state land, it's public land, they're entitled to park there. We're just trying to raise awareness to say, pay attention to the tides. When the tides go out and you get stuck there, don't just, jam your propellers through it, or be careful where you're anchoring or how you're anchoring. Unfortunately, when Taylor did the seagrass survey, they saw a lot of prop scarring, anchor scarring in this area. So, it's, when we asked Taylor, why can't we put a breakwater there, they said, look, you gotta work on triage, save what's there. It's very hard to get permitted, and the conditions may not even be exactly right to put a breakwater where there's not something right behind it. So they said, let's focus on saving what's there, and we'll talk about the next plan. So in the interim, we're talking about putting informational buoys. This was done somewhere up in the Tampa area. I'm trying to remember the woman's name, Samantha Berry. I don't know if you know her, Bud, but she's a scientist up in that area, and she did a study with some informational buoys, and there's some very positive results. Not everyone's going to pay attention. Some people will kind of ignore it, but even if a handful of people pay attention, I think we can make a difference. The overall plan, when it was estimated 9 months ago, was about $1 million. About 20% of that is the engineering costs. All of that we've raised. The materials and installation are the bulk of the costs, and again, the amount there will really depend on whether we have the opportunity to share some costs with the Bureau of Land Management. So that's a bit of the wild card, but we're shooting for $1 million plan. I'm really happy to say that we've raised more than half of that already. So the local residents in this area have been amazing. We've raised almost $200,000, and we just this weekend got commitments for $100,000 if we can get people to match that money. So that's a really exciting development now, because that'll be another $200,000 into the project. We've raised our 175 commitment from Andrew Red Harris. We've gotten commitments from the Munson Foundation, Fish and Wildlife of Florida Foundation, Well-Beings, which is does a lot of work out of Palm Beach. We got a $75,000 grant from the IRL National Estuary Program. They're very interested in what we're doing, because we are the very southern tip of the Indian River Lagoon. They've actually provided funds to have us have some grant writers help us out, and they're really interested in having us succeed here. I show above the line, we've got that where we're shortlisted with the Village of Tequesta and the CPI grant. If we can get the matching funds to match what we just got the commitments of this weekend, that takes us up to almost 750. We've got a few more grant applications outstanding, and we're just starting to reach out now to local businesses and some of the bigger businesses. So we got our work cut out for us, but we're really pleased with the progress we're making. We're open to ideas. If you know of businesses that support this kind of thing, or local foundations, we're all ears. We'll talk to anybody. What else can I say here about this? We have had conversations again with our elected officials about potential state appropriations. We met with Brian Mast's office last week, and they're very supportive of what we're doing, willing to write a letter of support. Federal money is tough. We're a very small organization. It requires a lot of administrative work. It's worth it if you can get a big chunk, so we are talking to them about what potential opportunities there may be. So, in the meantime, this circle of the community is expanding, and as I said before, we're so encouraged by the amount of support, and our approach in developing this project really has been to create it in a way that there's no downside for anybody, really. I mean, we are benefiting anybody who uses that water, enjoys that water. We've talked to community groups. We got a letter of support and unanimous support from the Jupiter Inlet Colony. We're from the condominiums along the water. We've talked to recreational groups. We've got Blue Line working with us, potentially doing a front fundraiser. Get Up and Go Kayak has our brochures there for their people who use the glass bottom kayaks. West Palm Beach Fishing Club wrote a letter of support. They represent 1,600 members. We've had some strong media. We've got local and environmental foundations we're talking to. Obviously, our relationship with you guys in Palm Beach County is very important. And then the local businesses, maybe you've seen around town, but we have our brochures around it. Pinders and Jupiter Water Sports and Blue Line, and trying to really get the word out to broaden this community of support. We were just at the Wild and Scenic Film Festival on Saturday night for the second year in a row. A lot of people came by the table, and everybody is just so psyched that we're working to try to save this area. A lot of paddle boarders, fishing people, yeah. So these are the organizations we've gotten sort of formal letters of support or endorsements or funds from, so we're excited about that. And then just finally, any questions you have?
So have you guys had any opportunity to be out there on our news?
That's one of the things that I've been talking to Jay about, is sort of the communication piece now.
Yeah.
How can we get on your website? How can we not just to make people aware of what we're doing to save it, but also I think the education piece is really critical. We all use this water, right?
I know.
So how can we save it?
And I'm talking like on TV,
Oh.
like get you out there to, it really needs to be talked about. I mean, you have so many people passionate here and in our area that I think you need that outlet.
We have had some really good press coverage on
Okay.
all 4 major TV networks.
Okay, great.
We've been in Florida Weekly recently.
Okay.
We've been early on Palm Beach Post, as well as, what's it called? It's the online version of Saving the Seas. Come on.
Treasure Coast,
No, it's through all the Florida major papers, all the Florida papers. They share stories about helping, I'm not gonna think of it right now, but, anyway, so we feel
Okay.
very lucky about, I mean,
Okay.
we'll take more, trust
Okay.
me.
I'll start putting little feelers out there, because I think that and social media, you know, the younger generation here is all into their phones with.
Yeah.
They need a short little, oh, this
Right.
is what's going on for their attention span.
So,
But to be
We
able to
do
get that
have
to-
LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I will
Okay.
confess, because we've been so busy doing other things.
Sure.
I don't post very often.
Okay,
If you know of someone who does all that stuff who would like to help, I'm all ears.
okay.
What was I was also gonna mention something else. Oh, we'd love to get in Jupiter Magazine. Because I
Okay.
really think the story about our partnership with the Andrew Red Harris Foundation
Yes.
is a really cool community story. And they invited us to the Andrew Red Harris Day, which has been designated by the town of Jupiter the first Saturday of December every year. And we went to their event and presented the project, and their supporters were so excited about it. And
Okay.
just, I mean, when we said we wanted to name the islands the Andrew Red Harris,
know,
there was an audible gasp in the room.
Yes.
And clapping, and it was unbelievable. It was, so, yeah, help us
Okay.
get the word out. I'm all ears.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, of course.
Any other
You guys
questions?
have any questions?
how's the permitting going?
Oh,
The
thank
last,
you.
the last
Duh.
thing I remember, FDEP staff had a list of questions and
Yep.
comments, and
Thank
how's
you.
that going?
Yes, I'm sorry, I said I was gonna give you an update and I forgot. Yes, DEP sent us the request for additional information. Taylor was sending the response 2 weeks ago, and then they got an additional question about, please show us why you still need to do this with the lower speed limit. They're responding to that now, and they're supposed to get it back today or this week, and then the DEP has 30 days to respond to that. What I did learn, which was very interesting, is with this permitting, they can't come back with any brand-new questions that have not been raised before. So the questions that Taylor got initially, they can ask more detail on them, but they can't ask about new things. So Taylor knows what they're up against right now. They've had a very good dialogue with them, and so fingers crossed. The Army Corps, same thing. They're having great conversations, sharing a lot of information. They don't have a timeline that they have to work by. So we're totally at the mercy of when they get back with their questions. Our hope is that we would have permits in place by the end of the summer, early fall. Our hope, and the reason we're pushing on the fundraising now, is so that as soon as we get the permits, we can go. We can do the pre-engineering drawings, go out to bid, hire a contractor, and do the work. We'd love to be done by the end of the year. I probably shouldn't say that out loud, because I don't want to jinx us, but if everything goes well, I don't see any reason why we couldn't have it done by the end of the year or first quarter of next year. Oh, yeah, I mean, as is normal, the DEP and Army Corps have come to the site. They've come around with the engineers to look at it, really understand it more deeply, and, and like I said, they know it because they've been across the way. And we have a lot of support from the IRL Aquatic Preserves group, and they're part of DEP. So while they're not responsible for the permitting, they're asked for their opinion. And they're one of the first people who came out and looked at this and said, yes, this needs to be done. So we're hopeful. I hope next time we talk, I can good news about
Yeah.
the permits.
Thank you.
Michelle?
I'm curious about what happened with that dude that was here a couple of months ago who was bummed about the project.
Yeah, yeah.
Whatever happened with
Forgot
that
his
guy?
name.
So he lives in my building. I have offered to sit down and talk about the project from the beginning. I did see him a couple weeks ago and he said, yeah, let's sit down and talk, but I haven't heard any more in terms of his concerns. So,
Can I say
yeah,
about that?
sure.
Because he was here.
Sometimes, the question is sometimes asked or and answered in law or for reviewing committee. I think, he submitted his remarks, in writing, go to the site for the DEP and the Army Corps, they have correspondence there, which they received. It's in, I think, at this point, it's, to go to Sue's comment, they're now asking, tell us why, since the speed limit and the wake zone has been approved, why would you now need this done? And that's essentially what she was getting to.
Well, he had a lot of questions, and I did share them with the engineer, and I said, hey, are there any teeth here? Because honestly, I want to do what's right, for the community as well. And the engineers were not concerned. They said these are all issues that the Army Corps and the DEP vet very carefully. If there are navigation issues, this is not going to happen, right? So we have to let the experts really pass judgment on all those issues.
This might be unrelated, and Sue, you may not know the answer, but Bud might.
Yeah.
Is their data similar, but probably not as comprehensive as Bud's Loxahatchee River District data, but are showing, like seagrass surveys, water quality, bacteria levels? Is any of that happening on the Indian River Lagoon, and particularly in the Jupiter Narrows part of it?
Go ahead, Bud.
The short answer is yes, it's limited. So the St. Johns River Water Management District has a seagrass survey that they do through the whole Indian River Lagoon system. I know they have that report, and some of the transects are in that vicinity. So you don't have the whole area mapped, but I think Taylor did some pretty comprehensive analysis of historical aerial imagery that made a pretty compelling case. Our water quality station is right there at Cato's Bridge, so we've got decades of water data. Yeah, there's information tied to it. It may not be to the detail that everybody would wish they had, but there's good information from there.
Okay, well, thank you. I was just curious.
I have been told that the water quality is quite good in our area because we're so close to the inlet, so there's a natural sort of flushing process. But again, I'm not the expert.
Good.
I'm gonna wear a second hat. I'm on the Citizen Advisory Council for the IRLNEP and the Finance Subcommittee. They're moving south. This is a very, very important project to the executive director and the STEM committee and so forth up there. And there are work with others to bring that south. Citizen science, seagrass monitoring, all kinds of things. Fishing. Hold up.
Good, good.
Anything else? One comment.
Uh-huh.
So, since your area is in Tequesta and you're going for a name change, Red Harris Islands at Tequesta Narrows sounds pretty good.
Okay.
You would get full-throated support from us as well as council, I believe, but
That would go a long way. That would be very helpful.
Tequesta Narrows, did you say?
I like it.
I think honestly, our goal would be if you guys, council, Palm Beach County, could write a letter that says you would support the naming of the islands, that's good information to send to the state then to say, the community wants this to happen, and honestly, we can go on Google Maps and name them that and start, I told the people at the Andrew Red Harris Day, start calling them that. What the heck, why not? So So
Who do we send the letter to? Well, you get home and you
let me
figure
let you
it out.
know. Let me
Okay.
let you know, because, you know, maybe you direct it to us and we pass it on to the state, or we pass it directly to the
Let-
state.
Let us know.
Address to whom it may concern.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time and attention, and
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
thank you so
coming.
much.
That was kind of a joke, by the way. I didn't want to ruffle any feathers, but. Okay. Consent agenda from February. Anyone have any changes?
Is it the minutes?
Yeah.
No, I didn't have any.
All right. Could I get a motion to pass this agenda from February?
You mean the minutes?
I'm sorry, minutes, yeah.
Yeah. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from February 12th.
I second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. New business. So I'd mentioned before, we kind of have to strike or delete number 5. So I think, Jay, you might want to say a few things here so I don't step on any legal toes, if you know what I mean.
On the,
Number 5, I'm not going to say the name of it.
What are we talking about, 4?
well, there's still
Tree
4. Do you
trimming?
want to do number 4 first? The Seabrook Road tree trimming?
Oh, my numbers are off. I'm talking about new business. It's not, it's 5 and 6, so.
Yeah, I got number 4 is new business.
Oh,
Seabrook.
I'm looking off.
I edited it, yeah, so.
I did not see it. When did you send it? Anyway. Okay.
It didn't get resent, so.
I'll wait until the end then
Okay.
to discuss that.
4 is the tree trimming on Seabrook Road.
So the first version of this agenda had this?
It
that you
did,
sent?
and then I just updated and
Okay.
pulled that out.
All right.
Top secret stuff.
Apparently I didn't get it, but yeah, I'm sure you sent it. Okay, so the Seabrook Road tree trimming. I brought this to the attention of committee because someone, a Tequesta resident in particular, in Tequesta Gardens, had brought it to my attention. And I just wanted to determine if this was the status quo of tree trimming.
That's a
to-
serious hack.
To clear
mean,
limbs away from electrical wires.
That they do
FPNL or their contractor performs this work, and it was quite
Extensive.
shocking, yeah.
I've never seen them be that dramatic.
I have.
You have.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
I
so-
understand it, but, wow.
We need to drop those lines.
So Jay
Yep.
sent to me
Underground lines.
the tree trimming, our suggestions on tree trimming, the FPNL, National and State Vegetation Management Standards tree trimming. And apparently this is how you trim trees away from power lines. However, it was interesting when I read through this that they say that it, let me see here, if I can find it.
I've got it on-
Preserving overall tree health and, where is it? And retaining structure of the tree. I don't know, doesn't seem like either of those are actually occurring. Well,
Well,
They do, that is their,
I've seen
I
it,
think-
and I think that's what I put
that
in.
one looks severe, but.
In the memo, it's not something unusual, but it was exaggerated, and it was brought to my attention, so I thought I would.
the history, and maybe Jay knows it,
You probably know it better than I do. I know the present, but
know,
you can tell
this
about the
is-
history.
This has evolved over the last 20 to 30 years. Originally, FPL tried through, information on their website and mailing things to customers, telling them, how they would like for them to plant trees and bushes and other stuff to avoid problems with overhead lines, and in some cases, underground lines. And then about, I'm gonna say 10 to 15, maybe 12 years ago, they realized that the carrot wasn't working, and they got the Florida legislature to allow them whenever and wherever they want to do this to protect their infrastructure. And most people don't realize, you know, they think that tree that's in their backyard or their front yard, they're shocked when all of a sudden, without warning, FPL does their thing, and it's like, boom, that's a,
Like those.
and that's how they do it, and it's horrible. And now it will grow back, and it'll fill in that V cut that they made, but it's, you know, it's temporarily ugly, and they have the right to do it. They got the legislature to pass a bill that said they can do it.
What's the
Even
update?
after it grows back.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
all this
it's-
witches.
it's an
and
unnatural look.
broomstick going straight up. It's awful.
I mean, unfortunately, it's just, FPL does have this right tree, right place policy, and it's not even close to meeting that. And unfortunately, because it's directly under it, the style of pruning they do is this V pruning. I actually went out to Country Club today to look, and what people don't realize is they also do the same thing there. It just happens to be on the back side of the trees. So the side pruning is done on Country Club, but it's away from the street side, so it's not as noticeable. But I mean, I don't think there's really anything we can do about it. I talked to Public Works Director, talked to Village Manager about it after your memo. And I mean, Doug Chambers' mentality, who's the Public Works Director, is we need to be planting more, I won't call them understory trees, but, you know, a little bit lower trees. But unfortunately, you don't get that beautiful canopy that you get from an oak tree.
When, do we know schedule-wise when they're gonna start dropping these lines?
So on this one, I don't know. I don't think there's any imminent plans to do anything on Seabrook. I know they're exploring some other areas closer to the country club. I don't think there's any imminent plans here on Seabrook.
Our main roads should be like priority
Yeah.
for the village.
Yeah.
Done.
I'll mention that to FPL next time we talk to them about it and say, especially this spot.
Yeah,
Um,
our whole main
It's-
Seabrook, Tequesta Drive, Riverside Drive, where everybody, Country Club Drive, because it's just that beautiful canopy that everybody wants, and the whole village gets to appreciate it. Yes, as residents, we would like our own yard lines dropped, but I think as a whole for the village, that should take priority.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really just the stretch in front of Tequesta Gardens too. So the lines are on the other side of the road, and then they go across to Tequesta Gardens. If it was a new development, we could require them to bury it as part of that project. So if they ever redevelop, we could do that. But until then, I think we're at the mercy of FPL, because you'd have to bury them under the street as well. So there'd be a disruption to Seabrook. It'd be a big project.
So one thing I did notice when I walked through this and took pictures is on that side of Tequesta Gardens, there are shorter wooden posts that are holding up the electric wires. And then on the east side of Seabrook, the other side of the street, you have much taller concrete posts that look like they, were just recently installed.
That's right, they did.
The fact that they increased height.
Yes.
All the trees on that side of the road are, they still trim a little bit, but they haven't grown to that height yet. And I believe there's only like 4 of these wooden poles on that Tequesta Garden side.
Right.
That's right. They hardened the east side of it, but I don't know that they will ever harden that side because it's just one little stretch.
Yeah.
So it looks like that part got ignored. I'm trying to drop it down and show you guys the street view.
Well, and one of the concerns is, if you saw these pictures, the one picture where the V is really exaggerated.
Yeah.
The side that's away from the road hangs over the parking lot at Tequesta Gardens. So, I mean, they talk about, stability or retaining structure. You get a nice storm or hurricane through there. A tree like that is going to be far less structurally sound as compared to a regular tree or a tree that's growing naturally. And if hanging over the parking lot, I mean, it could do some damage to DeQuesta Gardens. It's a valid concern.
But you gotta have the power lines protected, so,
I know.
yeah.
Doug Chambers is big on requiring landscapers to follow, national arbor standards for proper tree trimming.
Yeah.
So one of the things we did in Palm Beach was we required FPL to get a tree trimming, a no-fee tree trimming permit so that we would know when they're doing it and could monitor what they were doing. So in other words, if this fellow or group that did the photos that Brad has shown us, if he went overboard, well then if somebody was monitoring it, they would probably catch it and stop the chopping away at the tree. Doug has done that in my neighborhood with the trees up there where I live. The oak trees are owned by my homeowners association, and Doug has shut Comcast and AT&T tree trimmers down many times, telling them you don't have a permit and you're not following national arbor standards. So this one might, but see, FPL's not required to let you know unless the local government creates a permitting process where they have to come in, but you can't charge them. You're just doing it so you know where they are and when they're doing it, is basically it.
I'm gonna follow up with that, Tom. If he's following the National Arbors tree trimming.
Yeah, there's a name,
rules, whatever it
Arbor
is.
something, I forgot.
There's a huge, so many people are under this false idea that hurricane trimming needs to be done to these palms and trees, and when you take those nice sable heads off and you're down to 3 little sticks of fronds up there, it's so bad during hurricane because that could just take the entire palm or tree away. You need all that green. It should be the seeds that get taken off and the dead fronds, and the rest should be left. I mean, that's the structure of those palms, and it protects them during hurricane season if a hurricane were to come through.
Oh, they took those off, too.
So just adding my little 2 cents. So it's like, oh, don't do that to the palm. Anyway, so I agree that they should be following some kind of rule.
All right, so I don't know what we can do with this other than I like the idea of a no-charge permit. Is that something that we could suggest to council?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I motion that we do
Yeah, if you want. I make a motion that we ask the village council at the appropriate time to give consideration of a no-fee permit for FPL and/or their contractors and subcontractors that do landscape maintenance to pull that permit, no-fee permit, in advance of starting to work.
I second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? It passes.
I'll work that into our code update that I've got a bunch of different updates on, which, by the way, I'll just give a quick update on that update, is I took some code changes to council a couple weeks ago, and they were in favor of the green building recommendations you made and the tree recommendations you made with Steve Parker with the prohibited species. So it looks like those are gonna move forward. So in the next few months, we'll get those adopted and have an official green building policy.
Awesome. Can I add to
Excellent.
some of
That's
those that
great.
should be on Bud?
Oh,
You were
sh-
talking about the constructions, just a real quick one. Do you see a difference when the contractors are using those really big fencing and screens with the bags? I mean, I'm thinking that should be across the board instead of those little sticks with the, black, I don't even know what you call that.
Yeah, it's like, almost like
It's a
black
silk-
garbage bag.
It's like
Yeah.
gone in
Yeah,
in
it
a
blows
week.
away.
So it just can't, anyway, so that's just quick.
We'll talk about that, well, at next
At
month with
another
the
one?
construction update.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So, moving right along, old business. I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts and recommendations about the Living Shoreline presentations last month. I appreciate everyone attending. Like we had said prior to the event, we could have 20 people or 2 people. Well, we had 3 people, so. But the questionnaire that I did hand out, everyone was very positive. They would like to see more of them. And a couple comments on here with regard to environmentally related topics that are interested for future evening events. Let's see, this guy's handwriting. Protection of natural areas. How to prevent kids from campfires in the dunes. And then the last question, any environmental concerns that you'd like for us in our normal committee meeting to address? One was boat issue with manatees and boats going too fast affecting living shorelines and wildlife. So I think
Isn't that what we presented?
that's kind of what we were doing, but
Apropos.
I'm happy to have these 3 people show. Actually, there were a few more people than that, but only 3 people
Outside.
filled out the questionnaire. So I would like to get anyone's comments about, in general, the presentations, the whole evening. I mean, I thought,
I love it.
to start off with, I think the presentations were wonderful. I think they hit on all the major points very succinctly, and I think we kept it under the time that we had allotted, which I thought it was also very important.
I agree. I think the concept of presenting these, whatever we're gonna end up calling them, a workshop or event
Evening
or
event,
whatever,
yeah.
it falls in that line of education. And perhaps as we come across topics like that are instrumental for the community to be involved in, if the more they see these opportunities, perhaps it will start to grow on itself, or we find another way to present that in a different venue. Maybe it's not the way we did it maybe it's going to be at the food trucks event or something, I don't know, but I'm just saying that perhaps we do keep working with it and see how we can develop a balance
Yeah.
to create education with it.
Yeah, Jay, after the meeting was over, Jay and I spoke briefly about this, but we didn't get into the weeds, but I think we were both on the same page about trying to get the students' environmental committee at Jupiter High School to either for us to take this traveling salvation show to them, or they come here and as a field trip one day, and we show that
Good
whole
idea.
thing to them, and then maybe we can get some of them to be part of, volunteers for the things we want to do in the future, and so on and so forth.
You preempted my update at the end, which is randomly, an Eagle Scout who's in the Jupiter High program reached out to Peter DeWitt about improving commercial recycling in Tequesta. So Peter put him in touch with me. I met with him last week, and he's interested in getting a lot of Jupiter High students to go do this initiative to push and improve commercial recycling in Tequesta. So he's gonna come give you a presentation at the next EAC meeting. He told me he got a 1560 on his SAT, so he's a junior, so we've got him for another year. So he's a really sharp guy, so I think you guys are gonna like him next month.
That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Awesome update.
That's a perfect example of another venue, another way to,
Yeah.
yeah. And also, since you just said Eagle Scout, there's also the other organization for students, it's called Congressional Award. That's very intensive, and if we can identify any or present to any of the students that any of the schools in our area that affect our area that are in that program, they have to also do a very comprehensive project, and perhaps we can reach out to them as well, give them an opportunity.
comments about the presentation, the evening event?
It was great.
Okay.
Good information, good presentations. Thank you, Meg.
Last item for old business, Arbor Day. It's going to be April 25th is the Arbor Day, I guess, celebration that is going to start at 9 a.m. Unfortunately, Remembrance Park will not be available, which I thought would have been perfect, but nonetheless, we're going to have it right here in front of Village Hall, planting the lignum vitae tree.
You know I love that tree.
Yeah, it's a good tree. It would be great for committee to be there. Unfortunately, as I say that, I'm not going to be in town Thursday or Friday that week, so I will have to miss it. But when asking for recommendations and suggestions, Michelle came up with a beautifully written one-pager
To tell you all about
in,
that tree.
in about one font that I can barely read. But
He's blind.
I probably can't read
Um,
that either.
But I think a lot of these suggestions in here are spot on. Can we implement them in the, 2 weeks or 3 weeks that we have, or 2
Oh,
weeks that we
that's-
have?
yeah, that's- well, maybe some version of them. What does the village already have in place?
Yeah, let me
Can't-
just I'll give a quick rundown. So it'll be at 9 a.m. So what we did last year is have the mayor read the proclamation declaring it Arbor Day. I was the MC and just like asked the kids questions about trees and Arbor Day and handed out candy to them, got them, I was kind of like the hype man, got them excited. And then Jessica, who was our chair at the time, then gave a speech about just the general importance of trees and Arbor Day. And so ideally, I believe the mayor's gonna be here again, I could be the hype man again, and ideally, we'll have somebody from the EAC kind of give a little bit of an overview of the lignum vitae tree or the importance of Arbor Day or something like that. And then Marcia Nelson, our historian, had the suggestion to make them, the tree a wishing tree, and so the kids are all gonna write down a wish on biodegradable paper. And we've already ordered the paper, and they'll write down the wish, and they'll put it in the tree, and then they'll all plant dirt back under the tree.
Very good.
But if you had some great suggestions, so
Well,
if
no,
you want us to do
already
any of those
got-
other ones.
So the students that are coming, are they invited from the local schools?
They'll actually walk here from Good Shepherd and
Okay,
from the Harvey
so
School.
You already have them coming, so
which
that's,
school?
yeah.
Heather and Michelle.
I think it's the Good Shepherd and Providence School, I believe.
Okay. So you already have the do I remember that if the village had seeds packets from other events that they had ordered?
We can buy them.
Like, would they come in time? Something that ties in with, like, I love the wishing idea, but something that helps instill in a child what, the concept of planting. It's amazing how they don't even, a lot of times, know how a tree or a vegetable or anything even comes out of the ground. But it's an educational process. If we had those, I know it's not enough time to do saplings, because I would love to do lignum vitae offer,
Yeah.
but that's not enough time to put that together. It's something that correlates to, maybe it's a seeds for, I thought that there were wildflower seeds that we had for some other project last year.
We can get some seeds and maybe put them in like a little burlap bag and, try and
A
make them
giveaway,
like
a
a little
takeaway,
giveaway.
with a
Take
little
them
bit
home.
of information about whatever, whether it's Arbor Day in general and that particular tree or not, or something, a takeaway of info.
Do you know how many children will be there approximately?
We've got 26, I think, RSVP'd for now.
And they're, I think you said fourth or
Elementary?
fifth grade, or
They're
third or
like
fourth?
third, somewhere between second, third, and fourth grade maybe.
Okay. All right.
They're really fun. And we had Joe Namath out there last year, so I got
Yeah.
them to they're all. I'm like, you guys don't know who this guy is, but ask your parents and grandparents; they know who he is.
Well, Michelle, you did such great work on this one pager. It seems like you know a lot about the lignum vitae tree.
I have an excellent specimen in my front yard if you would like to drive by and see it. It's an amazing tree. It
Well,
really is.
Perhaps maybe then you can
Oh,
speak a little bit.
walked right into that.
Oh, I did, didn't I?
It seems like you already have all the notes here, so,
Okay, yeah.
I mean, it's up to you. I don't
Yeah,
want to put you
no,
on the spot.
That would be fine. I
But I
would
will.
love to share my love of the tree.
Did you plant one that was like already big and kind of looking good? I tried one, it didn't work out.
It was already about 3 feet high, but now it's probably 8,
Yeah.
Well,
and it puts on a show
We're evaluating.
all throughout the year.
Yeah, I tried one and it just bombed, it did not work out.
Mm.
But it was very small when I planted it, probably the wrong place.
So I have a question for Jay. Have we been approved as a Tree City USA?
We are a Tree City USA, and we have 5 signs ordered that say we're Tree City USA. So Public Works and I have already identified them, and we're gonna put them in, probably next month or so. We'll probably kind of coincide it with Arbor Day.
Okay. You know, big picture, I only have one concern, and that is, I see this all across the country, and it disturbs me, but there's a tendency to always want to plant a tree for Arbor Day in a park, okay? But what happens over time is the park's open space gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and the kids can't throw frisbees anymore, the dad can't pitch the baseball or softball to the son, they can't do open space stuff anymore. So, you know, I'm not a fan of, every now and then, you know, the park is okay, but if you can find a streetscape area that you wanna do, that you don't have any money for, that's a great place to say, this stretch will be this type of tree, and it'll be however many, but if you can only do one a year, just do it. I mean, I hate to see open space get eaten up by, you know, unintended consequences of trees being overly planted in parks.
I totally agree with you, and Doug Chambers does too. He was already planning to plant this tree in this spot. So I think he was actually gonna put a few of them in before this, and I got him to agree to hold off on the last one. So he's gonna put a little, it's gonna be right out in the front of Village Hall out there. But yeah, we're not just forcing one in.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we would like to do, is Linda Smith, is it?
Yeah, there she is.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm late. Would you?
No worries.
Minute and a half?
No worries, we're happy to have communication from citizens.
I'm sorry. Linda Smith, I actually live in Jupiter. It's not that far away. But I'm representing the Sierra Club Loxahatchee group, and we have members in Tequesta. I want to thank you guys for everything you guys are doing. I love coming to this meeting. I don't come enough because you guys are inspiring. Green building standards, my previous life, I'm an architect. So sorry I'm late, but I was speaking at the Palm Beach County Solid Waste Management Board meeting today, speaking to the same folks that are actually your county commissioners. And what we're trying to do, the Sierra Club, and I think a lot of people, once they're aware, is try to get communities to reduce their waste instead of building a $1.5 billion incinerator. We do have a study that we paid for to crunch the numbers on some of the nasty things that are going to be created with burning our trash. I'm sure you guys are all aware of PFAS and all the stuff. Mercury goes up the smokestack, goes in the water, goes in the soil. So we are having a program tomorrow in the city of West Palm Beach. I know it's a little far away, at the Mandel Library, but it was free, and we're a nonprofit. So we take what we can get, and I do have some flyers, and the flyer has a link to the report. It's not green. New trash incinerators in Palm Beach County are expensive and major air polluters. And thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Okay. Did anyone look at the first version of the agenda that was sent out?
I saw,
I did.
I thought I did.
I thought I did, but do I remember it? Let me,
The first
I gave
item,
you the email?
the first item on the new agenda,
I don't
or the new
remember.
business, I'm sorry.
I don't remember what it was.
Okay, maybe, is it worth talking about that?
Yeah, I think it's good to bring up,
Okay.
especially with Bud here. It might be related to stormwater management.
Okay. So, I originally had a, agenda item, that included the area on Old Dixie
Oh,
that,
yes, yes, now I remember it,
looks
the
kind of
pictures.
unsightly.
Yes, yes,
And I included pictures,
yep,
and I called it,
yes.
I called it
Hellscape.
that.
Hellscape.
Well, it turns out that that was private property.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I was unaware of that, and likewise, that's the reason it's off of the agenda.
You
But-
did not take pictures from private property.
I'm sorry,
This did not
it was from the sidewalk, from the road.
Yes,
Yeah.
Men in Black, I'm gonna do the Men in Black button. You guys did not hear that. Okay.
But you have to realize that after 40 years and or longer, though that cement plant is gone, and it was one of the biggest eyesores Tequesta had, you know, it's an industrial kind of a thing. As people were coming into Tequesta on Old Dixie, they got a cement plant.
Is that, do we know if that property is retained by the owner, or is it for sale, or what's its status?
It's,
But,
he knows.
So it's under contract by a developer who's exploring options, but he has not closed on it as far as I'm aware. So it's still owned by CMEX, but it's under contract with a exploratory due diligence where they've done like phase 1 and I think phase 2 environmental assessments on it, possibly found things. I think they found something with the phase 1 which required them to do a phase 2.
So what municipality is that? Is it Palm Beach County, is it Village of
It's
Tequesta, is it Jupiter?
It's like 2/3 in Tequesta and like 1/3 in Jupiter.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Just curious, how would that site plan review and so forth be handled in that situation?
We haven't even crossed that bridge, but we'd have to do some sort of interlocal or joint meeting.
Yeah, that'll be a home dinger.
that would- Yeah, so,
Definitely.
will that be open to the public,
Yeah.
with a comment period?
that's if they even come forward. I mean, the person hasn't even closed on it. I don't think they even know what they want to do. I wouldn't anticipate anything happening anytime soon on it,
Okay.
so.
All right, so anyway,
That's why.
there was a little, it's like, whoops, I stepped in it a little. But I did stay outside of the property when I took those pictures.
And when Wayne comes, our building official, next month to talk about, construction site maintenance and runoff and that kind of stuff, maybe that's a discussion to ask him about as well, because our code does have some language that typically requires people to sod over a property after it's been demolished so that there's not stormwater runoff. So I'm not sure what the status is on that one with him and with the permitting, but that's something we could talk about with Wayne next month.
Yeah, I mean, there were some serious things that I saw from the road that,
Safety hazard,
safety hazards, I don't know.
if a kid
I
gets
don't
in
want,
there
yeah.
with an e-bike.
We'll talk about it next time.
How and when do we get in the weeds of the storm water, what's the word, discharge, pre-treatment of the water, if you will, like the swales, raising the lids where the water gets in to have more retention, things like that. I mean, that's probably a Margie kind of a thing?
Yeah, I think it'd be joint Marjorie and Wayne thing at the next meeting. Baffle boxes is something I think Bud said Jupiter has done. It's a new kind of, how new is that? Fairly? It's been around a while, but it's a process some people are starting to use to filter water, so we could have that discussion next month.
Okay. Yeah, the swale system thing, it's not just the country club. There's a lot of the older neighborhoods, the swales need to, we call it scarfed, be recontoured and scarfed, and to make them functional again.
So at our next meeting, are we going to be looking at what we currently have in our code so that we can address it from there, in reference to what we just received? Okay.
Bud, do you have a question?
I just wanted to comment that one of the benefits of newer development is is that stormwater plans have to be, you know, that changed, I think, in the eighties, is that things that were built pre-eighties was get the water off the landscape as quick as possible, and we don't care about treatment. But now, there's treatment in all new development, so that's one encouraging thing. The
Yeah.
details of how you do that treatment, whether it's retention, detention, or some kind of mechanism, those are all things that can be worked out, but that is a benefit of newer development, is that stormwater is carefully thought through.
Okay.
Plan.
I think, unless you all have further comments on anything from today, or
No, thank you very much for both Sue and Bud for coming today. We appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It always
Appreciate it.
helps us to become educated ourselves.
so, with that being said, I'll be happy to accept a motion to,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye. All right,
Motion
it's a
passes.
good meeting, thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
I felt like I got in a little bit of trouble, but
Oh, no, I was just trying to
He-
prevent you from
Jay's
incriminating yourself.
protecting you. Jay's
I
got
know.
He's got his antenna up.
Well, it's interesting that that's private property, because I assumed that was not.
Yep, so did I. Well, this thing's off.
Yeah, but, because I was wondering who's going to be approving the next level of whatever comes there. Now to find,
It was just crazy. I mean, they're giant pads of concrete.
which if the next owner needs that, that's a
Rebar.
savings for them, but the safety hazards of that rebar,
Rusted rebar sticking up.
yeah, that's not good. But you know a kid's gonna be in there.
There's a primary drainage line that runs from roughly Old Dixie and Bridge Road right